So, welcome to Transition to Preschool. For those of you who don't know what Matrix Parent Network is and does, we do empower families of children with special needs to successfully understand and access systems that serve them. Our strong desire, our reason for being, is that we want you as the parent to become successful advocates and role models for your children. We do not want to be the advocate. We don't want to be your mouthpiece at IEP meetings. We want you to learn how to be the advocate for your child because you'll be the lifelong advocate. I'm assuming that the folks who are here have children in early start or they're professionals, but you probably wouldn't be here unless you did. So if you don't, you're welcome to stay, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're going to be talking about transition from early start into special ed preschool. So who are we? I'm Alyssa DeFilippo. I'm Director of Parent Services at Matrix. I've been here about 10 years, and I am the proud mother of a 22-year-old who went through early start. So in some ways, it feels like a lifetime ago, and in some ways, it feels like yesterday. So having been there and having gone through this training and prepping for it, it really brought back a lot of the memories and the details and the excitement and the confusion and how overwhelmed I think I was during my transition. So this one's kind of near and dear to my heart because if I could help people over this hump at all, I'm happy to do so. And Margaret?
So I'm Margaret Johnston, and I'm the Senior Parent Advisor at Matrix Parent Network. I've been there about 8 years, maybe 9, I can't remember exactly. I have 2 kids who are now 22 and 25. They were not in early start, so I did not personally have the early start experience. My kids were identified later as having learning and emotional problems. So, but I have been through many, many IEP meetings, and I'm very familiar with the IEP process. So I'll be talking a little bit about that as we get later into the presentation.
So today you'll leave here knowing a little bit about the Lanterman Act and regional center services. I find that some transition to preschool from early start trainings kind of gloss over or don't talk about the regional center, but I think it's important to understand that there is a difference between early start and Lanterman and the eligibilities for each of them. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but the bulk of it will be about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, and special education services, and basically those differences between early start and special education services. That timeline between having the IFSP, which I'm assuming the parents in the audience, their child has one, the Individual Family and Service Plan, to the IEP, the Individualized Education Program. We'll talk about how to prepare for that initial IEP meeting and also the transition to preschool. And maybe one of the most important things is the importance of self-care during the process for you. This training is not COVID-19 specific, but I just wanted people to be aware that there has been a Department of Developmental Services extension of early start services. It happened on June 15th. And it's in effect for 30 days unless it'll be extended by the director of the DDS. IDEA is still in effect, which says that there is supposed to be a transference from early start into preschool, special ed preschool services. When Betty DeVos recommended her waivers, there weren't many waivers, but it was suggested that the timeline for transition from Part C, which is early start, to Part B, which is the school age services, could be delayed. So in actuality, this DDS directive is kind of following up on that and saying, yes, the regional centers services can continue, if you have a little one. So if you have a little one who's 2 years and 9 months, 10 months, 11 months, and you are going to be transitioning, or you already have transitioned and you're still maintaining the regional center services, as far as I know, the counties that we cover Marin, Napa, Sonoma, and Solano. Those North Bay Regional Center and Golden Gate Regional Center, as far as we have heard, are continuing services. If wherever you are is not continuing services, We would recommend that you start, you go up the chain of command as we talk about in our advocacy workshops and with school age, trying to resolve conflicts in a school or with a school age issue. Start with your service coordinator at the regional center. If you've reached out several times and you haven't gotten any answers with email or phone calls, then go to the manager of the regional center, of the early start service coordinators in the regional center. If after several emails and several phone calls, you don't get any communication, then go to the manager of that manager. The idea is to keep the lines of communication and collaboration open, because that is the way we have found that parents are best able to get the most appropriate services for their child. So I don't want to belabor this anymore. I just wanted to say that there is now a directive in place to extend early start services at least for 30 days from June 15th. And I'm assuming that that's going to be extended, but I don't know about that for sure. Everyone does really care about these little ones and making sure that they get continued services. So we can begin. The steps to take in transition to preschool is, first we want to learn about regional center and special education. The eligibility, the services, procedures, and the rights. We want to know what happens during the months leading up to the services, to make sure that you understand what's supposed to happen and the steps of how they're going to happen. We want to be able to organize your thoughts and your papers regarding your child's needs, including any assessments that you might have had, during the IFSP years, or especially during the transition. Because there will be assessments that will happen. You want to explore the preschool settings and the services that'll be most appropriate for your child's success in school, and prepare for your child and you for the start of preschool. So just a little bit about understanding regional centers. So you have early start, which governs the 0 to 3 years services, but then there's something called the Lanterman Act of California, which requires regional centers to provide supports and services to individuals with developmental disabilities 3 years old and up. You'll find, though, that most services for people with developmental disabilities 3 to 22 years are delivered through school districts, not the regional centers. And when your child turns 3, there is that definite end to early start, except now, not so much, but early start ends, and eligibility for continued Lanterman services is not automatic. And that's something that is really important to understand. Eligibility for Lanterman services is different than eligibility for early start services. So how? There we go. So your child must have a developmental disability that is expected to continue through life that causes significant limitations. And there are 5 categories that may result in this eligibility. There's cognitive impairment or intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, other disabling conditions that are similar to cognitive disability. And this, I can give an example of my own daughter who has something called Prader-Willi syndrome. And her hypothalamus doesn't function correctly. She has difficulty controlling her appetite, her emotions, her temperature, her sleep. Functionally, she needs help to function in the real world. She could probably get on a bus and go from point A to point B, but if there was an In-N-Out burger on the way, she'd want to get off and gorge herself. So she has an other disabling condition. Now, mind you, when she was 3 and we transitioned from early start to special ed preschool, she didn't become a Lanterman client right away, and they put her on like a temporary, a wait and watch kind of eligibility. I don't know if that still exists now, but might be different at different regional centers as well. But we were GGRC, Golden Gate Regional Center, and they didn't make her a full-fledged Lanterman client until she was about 6 or 7. So, just to know that it's not automatic. But also the 5th eligibility is autism. And this is something that also parents of kids with autism need to know, that just because you have an autism diagnosis does not mean that you will automatically get Lanterman Regional Center services. You may not, it may be something that if you don't get automatic regional center services, you might want to just keep that on the back burner. Call Matrix. We can help you. We can talk you through how you might want to go back and try and get more services, because especially when that child becomes 18 and you start needing some of those adult services, it's nice to have that in place. But again, you can call our helpline, you can talk to any one of our parent advisors, and we're happy to talk you through that a bit more.
Sorry, this is very touchy.
So if your child is eligible for regional center services, the IFSP is closed and the IPP is opened. Your early start service coordinator may continue serving your family, or you may be assigned a new one. Again, that depends on the regional center. I know at one point in time, North Bay Regional Center in Santa Rosa was having the early start service coordinators continue on until the child was 5. That did not happen at GGRC, so I think it just depends. There will be a meeting to develop and discuss that individual program plan, and that can include both your child's and your family's needs. And those needs then determine the goals and the regional center services. You do want to make sure that your concerns and your child's needs are in the IPP. It will be reviewed annually, or if it needs change, you can always call an IPP meeting. Examples of some services that the regional center will provide during school age years are respite. If people don't know what respite is, it's money that comes to the family so that the family can pay an outside caregiver so the parents get some rest, some relief. You can either find the caregiver yourself, you can go through an agency, you can pay the caregiver yourself, you can go through an agency to have the caregiver paid. There are all, different kinds of options. But just to know that that is something that is available, and you should talk to your service coordinator about that. They sometimes have parent trainings. They sometimes have behavior management and modification support. At one time, depending on the regional center, there might have been some kind of support for diapers. But you just need to be sure to ask for the needed service and don't assume that it's not available. Again, just as our advocacy training will tell you, having a good relationship, building and maintaining a good relationship with your service coordinator, it makes all the difference in having that teamwork and the collaboration that you need to get the most appropriate services for your child. So if your child is not eligible for regional center services, you do have the right to appeal. We would recommend asking questions, gathering information, document your thoughts and communication. And then there is an organization called the Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy, and they are part of Disability Rights California. They do offer free legal help. And if that is the case and you need to be in touch with them, again, you can call us and we can refer you to the right people depending on what county you're in. And then we also have on our website an introduction to regional center services, which will help kind of round out what I've just talked about. And that's pretty much all we're going to talk about the regional center, but I wanted to make sure that you understood those key points, that not necessarily eligible for Lanneman coming out of early start. There is another eligibility period you need to go through. You need to keep the communication channels open with your service coordinator so you can figure all that out. And that the bulk of the services that your child is going to receive through the school age years do not come from the regional center, but they do come from the school districts. So understanding special education. Everybody's involved in special education. That's why we have teamwork. You have the student. Actually, the student should probably be in the center of that circle, because that's what we're working toward, helping get the student the most appropriate services. Parents are involved, service providers, school administrators, school psychologists and specialists, sometimes the regular ed teacher, sometimes the special ed teacher, but everybody is working together, or hopefully working together, to make sure that the students' most appropriate services are gotten. So it's, in order to understand special education, you need to know about the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. And the IDEA has 6 pretty essential tenets, and it all starts with appropriate evaluation or assessments. That is a right that your child and you have. The Individualized Education Program, that is the document that's created. That is also the meeting. That's what the meeting is called, and it's also the plan. So I know that can get a little confusing, but this one acronym, IEP, packs a wallop. It means a lot. There are procedural safeguards that it's a document that you will get at every IEP meeting. that it documents you and your child's rights and remedies to resolve any kind of potential conflict. Now, it's a document that sometimes people just take and, you know, put into a folder and never read, but we really believe it's important that you read that. And in fact, we believe it so much that we came up with a new training last year, or maybe it's 2 years old now. It's walking through the procedural safeguards. We take it one page at a time, and we talk about each of those rights in part 1 of the training, and then each of the remedies that you have in part 2. So we usually give that in the spring. I have to say, with giving things online now, I'm really not sure what our yearly training schedule looks like at this moment in time, but if you're interested, keep watching. And I recommend watching this at some point. I'm not sure that this is going to be the thing you want to, it's your first go-to training. We have IEP basics. We have a walk through every page of the IEP, which might be better to do before the procedural safeguards, but just know that they're there and it's important to understand them. We have parent and student participation. That includes access to records, participation at meetings, consent to change in services. And then there are these 2 acronyms you'll hear a lot, LRE, which is called Least Restrictive Environment. And that means education with typical, and I put that in quotes, with typical peers whenever possible. And then FAPE, which is Free Appropriate Public Education. And we want to point out that it's not free best public education. We all want what's best for our kids, we know that. But in working together with the IEP team in a collaborative and understanding and grateful fashion as a parent, you'll find that you are getting what's most appropriate, and oftentimes that is best. It turns out just a-okay. So if you'd like to go back, if when you have the slides, if you're reviewing and you want to go back and look at IDEA, there's a link for it there if you wanted to take a look. We wanted to just introduce a little bit of the language that IDEA uses, and that is that IDEA provides for and governs special education services for children 3 to 22 years who need specialized instruction to access the general education curriculum. So when you start training yourself to talk the talk that the educators and therapists who are at your IEP meetings, who they use these terms all the time. When you start training yourself to actually use those terms and understand them when you speak them, that helps you to become part of the team. So that's just language is important. That's what I want to say. There are 13 eligibility categories for special education. There's a 14th established medical disability that only lasts from 3 to 5 years. But again, if you want to press on that link, you'll see the 13. I probably can't even say them off the top of my head, and I'm not sure I even need to at this moment in time, but you can go back and you can look at them. And it's important to know what the eligibility category is. Sometimes there are 2. There could be 1 or 2 categories. The goals, which are your child's needs, services, and placement, will be described in this IEP program, the document. We do have an individual education plan document, which explains the IEP and the process and IDEA in certainly more detail. And we have a couple of trainings too that I already mentioned. And if, again, you can link on that and go to it if you so desire at another time. Annual IEP meetings are held to discuss progress and make changes. And you can always ask for a meeting at any time if you have concerns. They should be conducted within 30 days. And you might want to consider not trying to ask for an IEP meeting every 30 days, every time you have a concern, because that could get a little old. But you want to make sure, again, that your lines of communication are open with the team and that you're collaborating toward the most appropriate services for your child. We're big on helping parents become the best advocates they can for their children, as we already said, and our advocating packet that we have online also helps explain that. And the training that usually kicks off our fall season is effective parent advocacy. So you can watch for that in the end of August, early September. So what happens before 2.5 years old? Your regional center service coordinator will help you to start thinking about certain things. You know, what do you want your child to accomplish during their preschool years? What assessments do you think might be needed to reveal their needs? What kind of an instructional setting might your child need to make progress? Is it at home? Is it a special education preschool class? Is it a typical preschool class? Is it a combination? What programs are available out there, and what are their eligibility requirements? And who's going to help guide you through this process? Hint, Matrix, you can call our helpline. We're happy to help you out. But also the early start specialists and your regional center coordinator are certainly there for you as well. So moving on to what happens between 2.5 and 2 3/4 years old. Your service coordinator will set up what's called the first transition conference. And this is going to create a transition plan. Best practice is to have the school district representatives present at this first meeting, although it doesn't always happen and might not always be necessary. As a member of the IFSP team, your family is included in the development of the transition plan, and a plan must be part of the IFSP and include those program options and the steps and the services. Specialists who have worked with your child will review the general program options and community resources available and discuss how best to prepare your toddler for the transition. They'll go over that transition timeline that I talked about and that I said is in the chart on, I think it's page 12 in the transition to preschool document. They'll review it, and they'll also suggest assessments that could be done. Now, if your child is an early start and they're receiving physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, there will be assessments in physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. Now, again, depending, normally, more likely than not, typically the school district personnel are going to be doing the assessing. But sometimes I've seen, depending on the regional center and the county, I have seen regional center folk, the people who've been working with your child, the vendors, doing the assessment, and then those assessments are accepted by the school district. So again, that's a question to ask when you're at this point: who will be doing the assessing? If there are going to be some new people coming in and doing assessments, those new folks can talk to the people who've been working with your kid. All you need to do is ask for that. And again, the better relationship you develop with everyone, the more likely everyone is going to be working collaboratively together to help get those most appropriate services for your child. I know I say that a lot, but my hope is that that word will flip off your tongue, appropriate, like it has flipped off of ours over these years of working with parents about talking about FAPE, free appropriate public education. So this assessment plan is created to determine eligibility, and the parent needs to sign this assessment plan before it can begin. And then within 60 days of signing and returning the assessment plan, the assessments are completed, and that next transition meeting is scheduled. And this is called the first IEP meeting. So what can a parent do during this time? You can organize your child's records. Get those assessments, any medical reports, even a copy of the IFSP, and get them in a binder and organize that binder with those little inserts and label things. And we have a getting organized packet. We have one for the early years and one for your child's school age years. You might want to look at the one for the school aged years just because that's what you're moving into. But you want to think about areas of your child's development. What should be the focus of their program, or what you think their needs are and what you would like to see them get out of a preschool program. There's a worksheet in this transition from early start to preschool services I keep talking about. It's on pages 13 to 14 called My Child's Strengths and Weaknesses. And we're actually going to look at that right now so you can get a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a chart that has skill areas, strength, needs or concerns, what I hope for in year one, which could translate into a goal, and what that priority is for you. Depending on what your little one needs, they may have some language needs. They may have been getting speech therapy. I don't know how many assessments you've read or what you've seen or how you've talked to the speech therapist if you have one, but with speech, there's the receptive. That's what a child hears, processes, and understands. And then there's the expressive, what they're saying, articulation, how they put the words together, and how they come out of their mouth. So depending, your child could have challenges or strengths in either one of these, and those should be revealed in assessments. Self-help, kind of, the dressing, the toileting, the eating, where are they in their skill level, their development of these functional skills. We have the motor skills, the gross, the larger skills, running, jumping, hopping. And then you have the fine motor skills, how they, you might have sat in if you had, so this falls into more of the OT, the occupational therapy, and the physical therapy realm. But that OT is more, pinch or grasp. Can they pick up the little jack and put it into a jar? Can they fit the square peg into the square peg hole? Can they do puzzles? How dexterous are they? Social, emotional, and behavioral. This skill area has certainly gotten a lot of press, even in the general ed curriculum over the past, I don't know, I want to say 5 to 7 years maybe. I remember when my daughter was in kindergarten and I was talking about her social emotional needs. I didn't get too far, and I had really good relationships with people, but it just wasn't something that was talked about a whole lot, 15, 17 years ago. How a child plays is often very indicative of many, many things. So you want to look at that and look at how your child plays in an area of strength, and then in an area of where you think there might be needs or concerns. And anything that's pre-academic. And this is sort of like, what do you mean pre-academic at 3 years old? And I get that. I think even pre-academic at 5 years old. I mean, the curriculum we have for kindergartners is crazy, in my humble opinion. But I do think it's important that you look at those kind of things. Do they know their colors? Do they know, I guess preschool is letters now. I don't know. In any event, you can look at this strength and needs worksheet and fill it out, and it will help you develop your concerns. The second part on the I guess that's the right-hand side, right? Yeah, of your screen. This is a worksheet to record, the activities your child likes best. Your child learns best when. Your child has challenging behaviors. If they do, how do you redirect that? And maybe just jot down some things that motivate your child. I think that, you might know all this in your head, but it becomes important to actually put it down on paper, because then you can refer to it when you're making your own notes. You can refer to it while you're in a meeting. You can share it better. You can give a one-page summary to a teacher. It just helps to kind of put it on paper. So what happens before your child is 3 years old? That's the first IEP meeting. And at this meeting, your IEP eligibility, it's the IEP eligibility meeting. Assessment results are going to be discussed. Eligibility for special education is determined. And if eligible, the IEP will be written and the IFSP will be closed. So the IEP meeting preparation, what you can do before then.
So I'm going to take over talking about the IEP meeting a little bit. So the first thing you'll want to do, and this is best to do when assessments are starting to be done, ask for the results of the assessments, the reports that are written. Ask that you get them before the meeting. Put the request in writing. And you can also ask for what draft goals are going to be discussed at the meeting. And having these things in advance is what's going to make you feel prepared and be able to have your questions in order. If you don't have these assessments before the meeting and you may be surprised by some of the results, it's just going to make the meeting not as useful to you and perhaps more emotionally challenging. So So it's a good idea to get that in advance. There isn't any requirement in the law that you have to get them a certain period of time before the meeting. But again, if you ask at the outset of the assessment process, you are likely to be able to get them. It's considered best practice for the school district to share those with you before the meeting. If you have a lot of questions about those reports, you might have a conversation with, for example, the speech therapist who did the assessment of your child's speech issues. So you can ask for meetings with those specialists beforehand. They tend to be very busy, and so you may or may not be able to get meetings or phone conversations with them. But again, if you ask nicely, you are likely to get a response. We've talked about organizing your paperwork before, but it's a very important point because you're going to have piles of paperwork to deal with. And so figuring out a way to get organized and do that so that when you go to a meeting, you have the information you need. This is going to be very important as your child's school years continue. We do have the Getting Organized information packet on our webpage, and that can be helpful. We generally have people put things together in a big 3-ring binder, but if you're one of those people who are more savvy with digital approaches, you can do it on an iPad or tablet of some kind, whatever works for you to keep everything so that you can find the information you need quickly and refer to it when you need to. Definitely writing down your own observations and concerns about your child. Refer to these when you're in the meeting, but your observations are important. You're the person who's the expert on your child. The other therapists in the room may be experts on how to deal with speech issues or OT issues, but you're the one who knows your own child best. And so your observations are important. We just went through the My Child's Strengths and Weaknesses workshop. And again, that's something you can use. We also have something called an IEP toolkit, which is a toolkit for helping to prepare for an IEP meeting. And both of these can be helpful in helping you organize your thoughts. It's very important as you're preparing for the IEP meeting that you keep in mind what is your child's interest rather than a fixed position. And what do we mean by this? Well, if you have in your mind, I know exactly where I want my child to go to preschool, and I'm not going to be satisfied if anything else is suggested, that's a fixed position. On the other hand, if you're saying the kind of environment I want my child to experience has certain qualities, and that's what's most important for my child, then you can be open-minded about whether one or the other placement might work best. The other thing that becomes very important is that, and this is part of getting the reports in advance. Sometimes the information you get in these reports can be shocking or upsetting to you. I know of one situation where a mom never was told that her child had an intellectual disability, and that was revealed in the first IEP meeting. And she, of course, was shocked and overwhelmed to hear that. You don't want that to happen. You don't want that kind of surprise. And whatever is in those reports, you're going to have an emotional reaction to them. It's hard to think about things that are shown to be deficits or delays. You don't want to think of your child as having problems, and you're going to have an emotional response to that. So it's best to think about those things in advance so that when you're talking about them in the meeting, you can do so in a fairly calm way. So now you've prepared and you're going to go into the IEP meeting, and we're going to talk about what you might expect at that IEP meeting. What is the meeting going to be like? Well, the first thing to remember is it's going to be long, probably at least 2 hours long. And so just prepare yourself for that before you go in. Don't go in, try to get a good night's sleep the night before so you're not exhausted or just not up for a long meeting. You'll probably know some of the people at the meeting. Part of your early start team might be there. So you'll know some of the people, but there'll be other people that you don't know. And if whoever is running the meeting doesn't introduce everybody, be sure to ask for introductions so you know not just what their names are, but what they're doing at the meeting. What is their role in the team meeting? Find out how much time they have allotted to the meeting. And if they say it's a half an hour or 45 minutes, you know that isn't sufficient. But it's good to know at the outset, how long people expect to be there. You certainly should either take notes or have someone at the meeting with you who can take notes. And you can bring somebody else to the meeting, your partner, a friend, your next door neighbor, anybody that has some knowledge of your child's situation can accompany you to the meeting. So bring someone if you can. Ask questions. There'll be a lot of terms thrown out. There'll be a lot of information thrown out, and don't let things go by that you don't understand. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's expected, and take time to get clarification of things. And the other thing is to take breaks if you need them. If you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, just say, I need a 5-minute break, or, I need to use the restroom, and go collect yourself and come back. Don't let yourself get into a situation where you just feel like either you're not processing things because you're overwhelmed, or you're feeling like you're becoming overly emotional. What's going to be discussed? Well, there's actually an order to the way an IEP meeting is supposed to go. Certain things are discussed in order, and it's not always the order that you as a parent might think of. One of the things we find is that most parents, one of the most important questions on their mind is, where is my child going to be going to preschool? That's actually one of the last things that gets discussed. So even though it may be the most important thing to you, it's not going to be the first thing that's talked about. So at the outset of the meeting, they're supposed to talk about your concerns. What are your concerns for your child? And it's a good idea to have written down a sentence or two so that when they say, what is your concern, that you don't forget, you're not there with 5 people staring at you, or 7 or 8, and you forget what you meant to say. Have something written down that you can share with the team that summarizes what is most important to you, what are you most concerned about with your child. The second thing that will be discussed is what's called present levels. And present levels are sort of the baseline. What can your child do now? Where are they now developmentally? And that's going to mainly be the information that's provided through the assessments. The professionals who evaluated your child in each area of suspected disability are going to present their reports and explain their observations. And you can put in your observations too at this point. If you are observing something different or additional, you can put those observations into the record. The next thing, now that we've established the baseline with the present levels, what your child can do now, the team is going to discuss goals. In every area where there's some kind of delay or some kind of deficit, some area where your child is not exactly where you would expect a child at this age to be, then there will be a goal. And the goal will be, again, starting from where they are, where we expect them to be a year from now. So when we come back next year and look at this plan again, we're going to look and see if they have made the kind of progress that the goal suggested. So there'll be a number of goals that are written into the plan. Then there's going to be discussion of services. if, for example, there's a speech delay and a year from now we expect your child to have so many more words or to be able to express themselves more clearly, um, then what kind of speech therapy services do they need in order that they're going to be able to make that goal? It's important to understand that the goals are for how the team interacts with your child and supports your child. It's not whether your child is performing, it's whether they're able to provide the support that allows your child to meet these goals. And so there will be a discussion of the frequency and duration of each type of special instruction and related service that's needed for the child to make progress. And then finally, the last discussion will be placement, where these services are going to take place and what kind of program is that going to involve. As I mentioned, placement is often the most important question on parents' minds. So let's talk about what's involved in placement. First of all, there's what's called a continuum of placement options. And the IEP team is required to review all of the different options available to you for placement that's going to meet your child's needs. So there's a variety of different placements that could be considered, and they're supposed to explain them all to you. They're going to suggest that one of these options is what they believe is the most appropriate for your child. And that's what they're going to offer as a placement. So what you're remembering here is that the school districts are required to provide what's called free appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And least restrictive here means to the extent possible with typically developing peers. So what's the preschool program going to look like? So I think Alyssa is going to pipe back in here and talk about what different types of preschool program there might be.
I will. Thanks, Margaret. So what program is, there's that word again, appropriate. You can consider many options. I mean, really, there's a class with children without special needs, with your child receiving the special ed related services, maybe such as speech, outside the classroom. So maybe you've decided you like the preschool down the block and it's with neighborhood kids and you know the teacher and you're comfortable there, but your child needs some speech therapy. So maybe on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, you bring them to the speech therapist, probably in the school district office or classroom, or wherever it might be. And they have their speech therapy and then they come back and they go to school. Now that's if you have the freedom and availability to do that kind of transportation. Is the district going to provide transportation for that? I don't know. That's something that you talk about with your IEP team. It could be a special education class, which is called a special day class. And a special day class is a class that has children, and everybody has needs. And often the special day classes are grouped together according to needs. So you might have a language enriched class where everybody is working on speech. You may have a medically fragile class and all the children in there have some kind of a medically fragile need. So there are certain maybe aides or a nurse that pops in every now and then, or maybe is even on site. So the special day classes are grouped sort of according to the needs of the children who are placed into those classes. You may be able to have your child attend both a special education class and a community preschool class, receiving the benefit of both. And classes with a mix of children with and without special needs are more and more these days being offered by different districts. So you might have a class of, 20 kids, 10 of them may have needs and 10 of them may be typical. So again, these are questions that you need to ask of the school district representatives who are either at that first transition plan meeting or the actual transition IEP meeting that you have together. One way or another, you'd be visiting the program. Now I know right now, maybe that might not be happening, but as things open up in the fall, I know that many districts are working on how to do social distanced education and making cohorts with kids and working with how to make sure especially the little ones are safe. Maybe precautions like that will be put into place, and maybe these special ed preschools will be opening up in the fall in your district, in your county. I don't think anybody knows right now, and that's the uncertainty we're living with. But let's just say that you could visit the program. It's good to check out the IEP team's recommendation before agreeing to the placement. That could happen before or after the IEP. And while you're there looking, you want to try and get a sense of, will this proposed placement actually meet your child's needs and address the IEP proposed goals? And it's good when you're in the environment and you're looking around, not to compare your child to others in the class. I mean, we all know each child is unique. And those students in the class have been together for a considerable period of time. Some may be older. So it's good not to go in and say, well, you know, my kid is this, or that kid looks like that compared to my kid. You know, but try and leave that at the door. Class populations are going to change with new students coming in throughout the year, depending on when they turn 3, right? So it's not like you start in the fall and you end in the end of spring. Kids are coming in and usually just in of the classrooms, and then they stay until the end of the school year or the term. The students you see during a tour may not be all the students who are in the class. And also just keep in mind that teachers and aides could change from year to year, as can class locations, you know, the actual brick and mortar spot. So just some things to consider. You want to try and get an understanding of the program from looking at the class and maybe talking to the teachers. So what's the learning environment and the structure of the class? Can you tell that from looking at the bulletin board? Do you see a schedule written on the side? Do you see that there's a chance for interactivity with the child? Like, do they talk about the weather? Are there, you know, little sun sticky things to put on the blackboard? Is there sun? Is there rain? You know, what kind of a structure do you get, and what's the environment of the classroom like? Do you see lots of kids' artwork hanging up? Does it look like it's more of a classroom for the kid or a classroom for the teacher? You can learn a lot from looking around a classroom about the types of learning activities that are going on. You also want to look about the level and the type of staffing. And this is what I was talking about before a little bit. If you have 12 kids in a class, and this is a special day class, how many aides do you have? What's the staff to child ratio? Is it a 2-to-1? Is it a 3-to-1? Is it a 4-to-1? You know, depending on the severity of the needs of the children in the class, you may have more staff and a higher ratio. So it will just depend, again, on what the needs are and what the most appropriate setting is for your child. You can get a sense of the type and extent of family involvement. Like I said, I don't think that you're going to go in and sit and do circle time with kids in preschool in a special day class, especially. But, you know, are there any kind of outside activities? Are there the little parties that are given around holidays? Are parents included in those? You know, stuff like that to just gives you a sense of what the extent of your involvement could be in the class. We have something called a Parent Observation Guidelines for Preschool Programs. This is actually, it's pages 17 through 20 in the transition to early start, transition from early start, sorry, to preschool services. It also was a standalone downloadable material in your Zoom invite. So if you want to take a look at that at some point, or, you know, when you're ready to go look at the school, it kind of, you know, guides you on what to look for and places for you to take notes. So it's a nice little 4-page guide.
Okay.
All right, Margaret, back to you.
Yeah. So signing the IEP. At every IEP meeting, there's going to be a pile of papers put in front of you that documents all of this, the assessments, the present levels, the goals, the services. All of that's going to be documented into a paper document called the IEP. And you know, generally the IEP team will put it in front of you and ask you to sign it. It's very, very important to know that you do not have to sign the IEP at the meeting. It's not only perfectly acceptable for you to take the time to review it. It's actually, we recommend to parents, even if you're thrilled with everything you've been offered and you just think this is the perfect program for your child, it's still a good idea to say, I'm going to take this home and reread it, and I'll sign it and bring it back to you. Now, there's two separate things they'll ask you to sign, and one of them is simply your attendance at the meeting. Everybody who was at the meeting signs to say that they were there, and of course you'd sign that, but you don't have to sign the document saying that you agree with the entire document until you've had a chance to review it and think about it. Also, we've just talked about visiting the preschool program. So you may want to have the chance to go look at the program, to visit the preschool before you agree, decide whether you agree with that as a placement. When you do get a chance to review it and go over it, and when I say take the chance to review it, I don't mean months. I mean, a few days. You want to take it home and review it in the next few days so that you can get it back in a timely manner. But you can consent to the entire thing. You can sign check the box that says, I agree to this entire document. Or you consent to part of it, or you can consent to nothing at all. And you just need to be aware that if you're consenting to nothing, either you have to go through some kind of dispute resolution, or you're saying, I don't want services. So usually it's a good idea to try to think seriously about what parts of it you do agree with, even if it's not completely acceptable. There may be some things that were overlooked. Maybe you think that some of the assessments weren't complete. Maybe you have other information, something that you expressed as a concern that just wasn't addressed. So in that case, you can ask for another meeting to have those things resolved. You can also call us on our helpline and ask us to help you review the IEP with you before you agree to sign it. So that's something that's a service that we offer. So if you would like that kind of help, please don't hesitate to call us and ask. Say you have signed the document and then a couple months later, something just doesn't seem to be working right in your mind. You're not seeing your child progress. Maybe the goals that were written down were trivial. They weren't difficult enough, and therefore your child's already met the goals within a couple months. And maybe a service was offered, but they haven't actually set it up and started doing it. Whatever the situation is, if you're just feeling like things aren't working, you should request another IEP meeting. You always put the request in writing. And when you do that, the school should hold a meeting within 30 days. Now, be aware of the fact that not every issue or problem needs an IEP meeting. If it's just a matter of something with the teacher, something you want the teacher to do differently, maybe you can just sit down and have a brief one-to-one meeting with the teacher rather than with the whole IEP team. So think about what it is, what kind of problem that it needs to be resolved before you think about having a meeting. You're entitled to have an IEP meeting within 30 days of whenever you request one, which means you could theoretically have 12 meetings during a year. But these meetings, because of the number of people involved, they're difficult to schedule. They take a lot of staff time. And if you are asking for a meeting every 30 days, you're not going to be a very popular parent. So think about when you need to have a meeting. Certainly, if you feel a need, you should ask for it, but don't do it for trivial problems. Think about what you actually need to have done and solve problems as close to the source as you can. Okay, so what happens now if your child is not eligible for special education? This is a situation that can occur. It's not usual, but it can occur that the intervention services provided to your child in early start solve the problem, and now your child is, developmentally on track and doesn't need special services. Are you going to celebrate? Maybe you should, because it would be great to know that your child is no longer needing that kind of services. But perhaps you think your child does need the services, and the IEP team, the assessment just doesn't recognize the need that you're seeing. If that's the case, then when the IEP team in the meeting says, we've decided that your child is not eligible, then you don't sign an agreement with that. You disagree. And then you request something called an independent educational evaluation at public expense. Again, it's good to have that request in writing. You can request it at the meeting, but it's good to follow up a request like that with a written request. And be sure to ask for the IEE at public expense. It is always your right to go out and have your child evaluated by whatever independent evaluator you wish to have do it, but they are quite expensive, and it is your right to ask for one at public expense. Or maybe you think, well, I thought my child needed more. They're telling me he or she doesn't. Maybe, maybe not. It's sort of a borderline situation. In that case, you might want to say, okay, we'll just proceed with sort of a normal preschool, or I'll keep my child at home, whatever the situation you're pursuing at that point. And I'm going to watch carefully. I'm going to observe my child. I'm going to pay attention to exactly what's going on with their learning and development. And if I see a problem developing, then I'll ask again for an assessment. And certainly in the situation where you're having trouble deciding whether you think there's a problem, this is another area where you can call us for help, and we can discuss with you different approaches you can take in that situation. What are you going to do to prepare for preschool? Question and answer with your child. Encourage your child to ask questions. Who will be at school? How will I get to school? Will you drive me to school? Will we walk to school together? How long am I going to be there? How will I get home? What are you going to be doing while I'm in school? Will you miss me? These are all very normal questions that your child will have, and encourage the questions and come up with answers for them that will make them feel comfortable. So you know your child, and you know how much information to give them. Some things that can help: show pictures of the actual school site and what your child will do at school. If you can, visit the school before your child starts to school. You can walk to school or drive them to school, and show them the route. If the playground is accessible, you can plan some outings and have your child play on the playground, or simply walk around the ground so it's familiar to them by the time they are going there officially. You can meet the teacher, so this is not a new person on the first day of school. You can meet them and have your child get to know them just a little bit. You can take pictures of the teacher and the room and make a little book for them. You can make up a going to school story and tell it lots of times before school starts. You can get library books about going to school. The Kissing Hand is a popular favorite storybook. So think about this, get some books, tell stories if they have older siblings or friends, and talk about when they first went to school. If your child is going to ride a school bus, you might get a toy school bus for your child to play with, and look at picture books about riding the bus. And you can also gather the special clothes. What's your kid going to wear the first day of school? And this is also something that makes it sort of a fun and exciting thing to think about the first day of school.
So we also have transition tips for you to prepare yourself. Sending your baby off to school can be very emotional. I know it was for me. You wonder things like, will the teacher understand my child? Will they get the services they need? Will the staff know what to do when they need help? Will they stand back and let them try things on their own? Will they have friends? Will they be bullied? I mean, the list of questions is endless. But here are some tips from parents who have been there, done that. So giving the teacher a one-page summary about your child, the home life, interests, strengths, challenges, that can be helpful. Oftentimes teachers will ask for that in a packet, but coming prepared for it shows, you know, you're kind of part of the team and already proactive. And if your child has a disability that's somewhat rare, might not be a bad idea to, again, and try and keep these summaries to one page only, readable with bullet points. So it's not like you're giving them a whole treatise on Prader-Willi syndrome, say, but provide the teacher with a one-page summary about the disability and how it manifests itself in your child. So they can just get a little bit of an inkling. And this could also be helpful if your child is a person with autism, because you know, it's a syndrome, and of course, different people react different ways. So it's probably not a bad idea to do that for every disability. Maybe helpful to take pictures of the first day, leaving home, arriving at school, putting together a little booklet for you and your child to look at during the first couple of weeks. Confirm the transport schedule if your child is going to be taking a bus. That's going to be real important. Make sure that your child has any of their extra special needs covered at school. Do they have any equipment that they need, or any kind of special diet or snack foods that they have to have? A change of clothes sometimes is necessary. Keep a tissue in your pocket and a smile on your face. I love that one. That came from somebody once. And then again, they mentioned the book, The Kissing Hand. And plan to do something for yourself if you can during the school hours. If you have from 9 to 12 free and you haven't had that for a while, maybe don't spend it all running errands or doing work. You know, give yourself a little bit of a break. And maybe create some positive images in your head about your child doing well at school. So it just kind of like calms you down when you're taking your deep breaths, just to alleviate some of your anxiety. And remember that self-care is not selfish. It's transition is an intense experience, but it's temporary. Your child is going to change and grow, and your feelings about transition will change and grow with them. It helps to embrace the moment and appreciate every second with your young one and what they're going through, because these are the first steps toward self-advocacy for your little one. Which is so important in the disability world, for the person with the disability to know themselves and be able to advocate for themselves. It's good for you to seek support both in navigating the process and the systems that serve you and your little one, but also help with your emotions, which is why, I mean, Matrix is always there for you to help you through the process and to listen and be a shoulder to cry on or help you with emotions. But finding a support group or starting your own is really kind of nice. Why not go for a hike or go for a coffee with some parents you meet at drop-off? Not a bad idea. You know, we're our children's role models, and they watch us how we manage our stress, our growth, and our change. So practice self-care. Get plenty of rest. Exercise. It's a proven way to reduce stress. Put some enjoyable activities just for yourself in your schedule. You'd be surprised how much our kids watch us. And when you're doing things like, you know, I'm doing my on-screen yoga now, you know, or I'm going for a walk with the dog just to organize my thoughts, you know, it kind of teaches them how, oh, this is how mom's doing it. Maybe I can do this too. Eating healthy, always a good thing, especially in the, what are we called now? Quarantine, the shelter in place. Find and surround yourself with people who give you encouragement and hope. I think if you think about it, we all have that one, maybe two people or so in our lives who have been there for a long time, and we kind of keep them around, but they give you nothing but trouble. So it's okay to just want to surround yourself with people who give you encouragement and hope. Consider a class in mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's evidence-based. Matrix has been known from time to time to facilitate these trainings, mindfulness-based stress reduction for children for parents of children with special needs. It's a six-week course, and hopefully we'll be doing another one again fairly soon. So if you're interested in it, please watch for it. I facilitate it and with a friend who's no longer at Matrix, but I bet I could whip her back in and see if she'd do it with me again. So mindfulness-based stress reduction, if you don't know what it is, Google it, look it up. It's, you know, based on age-old meditation, and it's really a good thing to learn how to just put in your toolkit, to put in your stress relief toolkit. Try not to feel guilty. Feel guilty about anything. I mean, this is on here as a catch-all, but, you know, try not to feel guilty. Guilty is not one of those emotions that serves anybody in any way. Be gentle with yourself. Self-compassion is really important. So try not to beat yourself up. If you think you've made mistakes, you know, learn from them. That's another good way you can be a role model for kids. Practice asking for help. We all need it, and it's really good to recognize when you do. Don't give in to resentment or frustration. I hate to say don't about anything, but, you know, resentment and frustration, they never get you anywhere. So try and remember that, and make self-care a habit, just like you would anything else, and a daily habit, because you may have a long road ahead, and it's good to start practicing self-care and get into the habit of doing things to take care of yourself now, because, you know, the old adage, right? You know, you have to put on your oxygen mask before you can do it for somebody else. It's true. So hop on in, the water's fine. Going to preschool is a big change for your family, but more likely than not, if you prepare yourself and plan with care, it'll be a positive experience for you and your child. Just time now to kind of reflect on what you've learned, if you need any more resources and any more support. Our number is all over everything that you can download. You can go to our website. You can check in with us whenever you want. We're always here,
Yeah.
and we're happy to help.